We thank you for watching this KVUE News Plus special coverage of the impeachment trial of suspended Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. We have an update on the case that we'll bring to you shortly. Joining us for this KVUE Plus special coverage of the impeachment trial of suspended Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, I'm Ashley Goudeau.
Good afternoon to you. I am Tony Plohetski, and we are now in jury deliberations in this historic impeachment trial. Right now, Ken Paxton's case is in the hands of those senators.
They've been deliberating for about an hour now, and so for those of you who thought that this may go quickly and that their minds were already made up, they certainly are showing us otherwise. They've not come back just yet from deliberating.
With the Lieutenant Governor laying out a schedule not only for today but possibly in the days to come, depending how long these deliberations actually stretch into the possible evening tonight and into the weekend.
And so what they are debating are the 16 of the 20 articles of impeachment against Paxton, and they accuse him of a range, really, of misconduct, from disregarding his official duty to whether or not he is unfit for office.
And then, Ashley, there are, as we have described them, those catch-all articles as well that essentially claim that Ken Paxton has undermined his office and not worked on the behalf of Texans who elected him last November to a third term.
And those are the last four. Those are Articles 16 through 20, which really say if you believe he's done any of the things. And I think Article 20 is particularly interesting, Tony, because it accuses that Attorney General Ken Paxton brought the office of the Attorney General into scandal with all of this.
And a scandal, according to the House impeachment managers, it has been, with them claiming over the past 10 days during this historic impeachment trial that Paxton worked on behalf of an Austin investor by the name of Nate Paul. According to them, that the Attorney General's office, the office that you and I as Texas taxpayers fund, that office was transformed into a concierge law firm for Nate Paul, who was under federal investigation. And they contend that Ken Paxton took a number of steps using his position and his office to aid Nate Paul during the pendency of that FBI investigation, which did result over the summer in federal charges against Nate Paul. But Ashley, as we have seen, despite all of the information and the evidence that the House managers say they brought forward, we have seen a vigorous defense from Tony Buzbee and Paxton supporters,
who say that there is no evidence that despite all of these articles of impeachment and the things that the House certainly believes that they have brought forward, the defense is holding to this idea that there was no actual evidence brought against Ken Paxton. And we very strongly heard the prosecution push back against this idea, saying that the testimony of the whistleblowers in and of itself is in fact evidence. And they also pointed to, the senators to documents. They actually, State Representative Andrew Murr, who is the chair of the House Board of Managers, so if you will, the head representative overseeing this impeachment trial, actually telling the senators, please write this down. And when you go back and you deliberate, pull up this document and pull up this document and pull up this document, and it proves what we are alleging or what they say, what we say Ken Paxton did.
So let's go over what is happening right now. The senators have gathered in a room in the Texas Capitol. They are going over each article one by one, and it's important to remember that each article has different prongs, different standards that must be met in order to possibly convict on that article. So they will be going through them piece by piece.
And I want to note something that Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick mentioned to the senators when he was giving them their charge before closing statements. He reminded them that the articles of impeachment are not divisible, meaning you have to believe that Ken Paxton committed all of the things alleged in those articles. And even beyond that, beyond agreeing or thinking that he committed all of them, in order to convict, you also have to believe that because of what he did, he deserves to be removed from office, because there's not a separate vote there. A vote to convict is a vote to remove from office.
Should they convict him on any of the 16 articles, however, senators will then take a vote whether or not Ken Paxton can be permanently banned from serving in an elected position in the state of Texas. Actually, let's also talk about the burden that must be met in order to convict Ken Paxton on any charge. That burden is the highest burden in criminal court. It is beyond a reasonable doubt.
And certainly we saw time after time after time the defense attorneys, Tony Busby, trying to plant those seeds of doubt. And it's now up to the senators for us to see if any of those seeds landed. But one of the things that I thought was interesting in his closing statements is he actually called, or not him, Dan Goudeau, rather, who is the assistant defense attorney, called for this PowerPoint. The senators all have screens in front of them, and they're running different PowerPoints and different elements from the trial. And he said, put up the picture of Brandon Kammick. And that is what reasonable doubt looks like. Brandon Kammick is at the time was a 5-year attorney out of Houston who was hired directly by Ken Paxton at the advice, we want to know, of Nate Paul's attorney in all of this, yes. Michael Wynn. In fact, Nate Paul, Brandon Kammick testified that Ken Paxton told him directly when Michael Wynn recommended you for this job, a man whom he did not, personally know. They served on a board together, but had no real relationship with, but that he was hired to be a special prosecutor to carry out what certainly Brandon Kammick believed and what he says Ken Paxton believed were true claims from Nate Paul about the wrongdoing and a conspiracy that the federal government had into him in an effort to take his properties. And it's important to keep in mind with regard to that burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Ashley, as one attorney just pointed out to me, the burden to remove your children, to take your children away from you, is clear and convincing. Beyond a reasonable doubt is a much higher burden. So in order to get it across the finish line for the senators to possibly convict Ken Paxton, that is going to be the burden that they will have to meet in at least one of these articles. It's also important to note that if Ken Paxton is convicted on a single article, the ramifications are the same if he is convicted on all of them. And there can be emotion, because when we talk about how the rules will work and how the voting will work, they are going to deliberate on these 16 articles. But once, under the rules that the senators pass themselves, and I'm tapping on this because this is my printed copy of the rules, once the senators vote, if they take a vote to convict, if he is convicted on one of the articles, someone can raise a motion to, all right, well, we've already done this and we don't have to vote on the rest of them because he's already been convicted and removed from office. And that's notable because there is such a long process to the voting that has to happen. So if you watched whenever this trial was getting underway and before it actually started, when they were ruling on pretrial motions, the way that the voting works is that the senators will all come back onto the Senate floor, and we've been told we will get about at least 30 minutes notice before that happens so we can alert you and you can join us on KVUE. But they will come back in, they will take their seats, and they will have slips of paper. And the question before them will be, for instance, shall Article 1 be sustained? It'll lay out the article and shall this article be sustained? And they will either vote yay or nay. They will each write their vote on a piece of paper. The bailiff will collect those pieces of paper and take them to Patsy Spall, the Secretary of the Senate. She will then at random read aloud each senator's vote and give a calculation breakdown of the yays and the nays. After that happens, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick then calls each one of the senators' names and they confirm their vote by voice. And so it is a lengthy process, Tony.
Yeah, and I want to show people we actually have created here each 16 pieces of paper.
Our producer, Lauren Pedersen, did this for us.
Name of each senator. And so we will be able to, in real time, of course, check the box, yes or no, for each article. Ashley.
And the full screen, we want to point out the full screen, you saw this one here. This is also something you'll see whenever the verdict comes down that KVUE has created to help you at home keep a visual track of what is happening in terms of who has voted yes and who has voted no on each of those articles of impeachment.
And while we can talk about the evidence that was presented and not presented during this trial, we would be remiss, of course, if we did not talk about the backdrop for all of this, which is, of course, politics.
Absolutely. Well, politics to the extent that a group of conservative Republicans within, Paxton's own office felt that his actions, and these are people who firmly believed in what they were doing, and even more than that, they believed in the man, as they have testified to that. Some of them looked at him as a close friend, a family member. They believed that they were fighting the conservative fight on the front lines of it by working in the AG's office for the state of Texas, and that they would then taking all of that and knowing, I think one of them said, I knew that us going was like signing our death warrant.
Yeah, career death warrant. But at the same time, we have seen increased efforts in recent weeks and months leading into this impeachment trial to try to stop Republican senators, particularly Republican senators who have been deemed at risk for voting against Ken Paxton. We have seen increased political efforts aimed at them directly. We have seen increased money being spent in this effort by Ken Paxton supporters and campaign action committees, political action committees that support Ken Paxton. That has become signature to this as well. But we also saw an admonishment from the lieutenant governor as he turned those juror senators into deliberations, stressing, Ashley, the significance of their decision, the historical significance of their decision, and urging them to treat this with the extreme gravity that this situation, this historic situation, deserves.
And I want to rewind, Tony, to something you said, because certainly those political machines were churning as this was happening, and we saw while the senators were under a gag order throughout this, and very early on after the rules were passed, as was issued in the rules required the lieutenant governor to put them under a gag order. They were to stay away from all of the conversation and the media and everything that, and the documents.
No public statement.
Right, no public. They weren't supposed to be in on all of this, and there were conspiracy theories a-brewing. Right. And we heard Tony Buzbee directly speak to those conspiracy theories. You heard him say, this is time to end the Bush era in Texas politics. And he talked about the Dade Phelan theory, that this was all retribution by Dade Phelan
because Ken Paxton called him out.
Had embarrassed him and called him to step down. And so some of those conspiracies were brought in. But then what I think was truly powerful was you had one of the most conservative members in the House of Representatives, Jeff Leach, deliver the final statements.
That his words were the final words of this whole proceeding. Jeff Leach really taking a more personal tone, so much so that Ken Paxton's defense team objected to the personal testimony that he was submitting as part of closing.
Which was interesting,
it was
Tony,
interesting,
because Tony Buzbee himself had said things that were quite personal
in nature,
and not evidence and had not been proven that so it was interesting that, you wonder, well, did he do that because he was trying to run out their clock, or was he even fearing that perhaps Jeff Leach was getting his message across to the senators and he wanted to interrupt and stop that?
But definitely Jeff Leach issuing something of a personal plea to those senators to, in his words, do the right thing, that enough is enough when it comes to Ken Paxton. And again, him talking about essentially doing life with Ken Paxton, that they had gone to Cowboy football games together, that they had gone to Baylor football games together, that they shared the same deep conservative Christian values that have been signature to both of their times in public office.
But that they're friends, that's his mentor, that they even go to church together.
Yes.
He mentioned, and that's why he became choked up when he himself talked about the vote that he had to take against his friend because of the evidence that they had seen. And really sort of saying to the senators, I've been in your shoes. I know how hard it is going to be to do this, but you have to do what's right.
Exactly. So we want to let you know that during the deliberation, which again, who knows how long it will continue, we're going to continue these cut-ins on KVUE.com at 1, 4, and 7.
And KVUE Plus,
and KVUE
right?
Plus throughout the course of the afternoon and into the evening. But again, once we get word, as we mentioned, anywhere from 45 to 30 minutes advance notice, we will certainly be broadcasting the results of the deliberation and the results of this entire trial.
Yeah, you can watch that live on KVUE on television. We want to note just some timing things because you mentioned this earlier, Tony. The Lieutenant Governor's intention is for the jury to deliberate until at least 8 p.m. tonight. If the senators themselves choose to go beyond that 8 p.m., they certainly can if they believe they are close, but they're each having to, this is not like a normal jury, a criminal jury where they have to come out with one unanimous decision. That's not what this is. This is each senator individually taking time to comb through 16 articles to decide how they will vote on each one of those articles, with it taking 21 to convict or 21 to acquit.
So we will be here continuing to monitor the situation. We thank you for joining us. And again, we will be back at 4 p.m. this afternoon unless news precipitates us joining you soon.
And we have a verdict by then.
Exactly. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Thank you.